So everybody got their classwork 12? Hunter, you didn't get to bring yours, did you?
No, but I do have it.
Well, what we can do, what I want you all to do, I want you to, in the interest of time, let's just talk about it this way. Hey, Avery.
Hey.
What I wanted to ask you in the closing math, not the closing quiz, the closing math, did you have any questions out of any of these closing math problems? And I can see too that we probably need to talk about for sure, and that would be question 8 and 9, because you will be asked on your final, how much does the buyer owe at closing? Now, Chris said he did one of those problems with you in the textbook. Did he do the one in Unit 21? Did he do the one on page 613?
I think so.
Okay, I think he mentioned, that's the only one in the textbook anyway.
Yeah, that's one.
He did that one, okay. But you had some in your take-home also. How much does the buyer owe at closing? And then there was one, how much does the seller get at closing? Those are good closing math problems. So I thought I'd make sure that you don't have questions. And in fact, we can even do those two if you want to, just to be on the safe side. What do you want to do?
Let's do them.
Number, number 8 and number 9. And I did find I made a mistake on the solutions on number 8. So let's go ahead and do that, and you can look at your solutions also. And Hunter, I don't know if you want to look on with somebody, or I tell you what, I think I've got another pack of these, or you want to look on? Okay. That might be easier than me going and try to find it. Okay, everybody, so numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, are you okay on your debits and your credits? Where things are entered? It's the class 12 homework, everybody. Class 12. So no questions on those? Does everybody know what we're doing? It's the closing math, class 12. In your pack, your closing math. So my question is, on that first page, did anybody get stumped on that, or do you need any help?
Can we go over number 6?
Number 6, we certainly can. That's a good one. Kim's asking about number 6, so let's talk about this for a moment. When we go to a closing as a buyer, if you're getting a loan from a lender, the lender funds that money to the closing on that day. In other words, it offsets the total cost of the sale toward the buyer. So anytime the buyer's getting a loan, at closing it will be a credit to the buyer. Does that statement make sense? It credits to the buyer because it's money coming in to the closing meeting. So that loan that the buyer's getting, 105, that is a credit to the buyer at closing. But the question is, what about the interest that he owes on that loan? So first of all, when you see, I thought somebody came in here today. I was looking around, my marker's gone. Here it is. I hope this is good. When you see the word interim interest is a buyer's interest, and it means it's always a debit. So interim interest is a buyer's interest, and it's always debit. So we're closing on June 26th. So this is a reminder, if we have the first payment due August, then there was a month skipped. So we're closing the loan on June 26th. We skipped July as far as making a payment. First payment is due August 1. Remind yourself that the interest is paid in arrears when we set up our P&I payment. When we amortize our loan, the lender says, you're making your P&I payment here, give us the interest out of that payment because the days in July have been accumulating. It's called accrued interest also, if you want to think about it right there. It's interest behind, didn't we call it interest in arrears? So the August 1 payment covers interest for July. What's left over for principal brings the loan down in August. Now tell me if that statement makes sense. We're closing June 26. You do not make a July 1 payment. You skip that month. August payment covers July's interest. And what's left over brings down the principal balance for August. Well, the lender says, we want some interest for June though, for these days that you are using our money, and we gave you a loan of 105. So $105,000 left the bank on June 26th, and they're not going to get a payment until August. They want interest for the rest of June because that money is being used, and they cannot sneak those days into the August payment because that will skew the amortized payment schedule, and so, or the schedule of amortization. So these days are called interim days. 26th through the 30th would be days that we're going to figure interim interest. Interim in the meanwhile, interest before the first payment is due. Because the first payment already covers the month of July, you're not going to add any other days into it. It'll just mess up the system of amortizing. So looks like 4 days, but this is the one and only time that the buyers pays that day too. So if you count on your fingers starting on the 26th, it's 5 days of interest that the buyer's going to owe at closing. Now that is something that stumps students sometimes, remembering to count that 1 day extra, if you want to think about it as extra. The money literally comes to the buyer on that day, and the lender says we're going to start charging you that day. The way I remember, every month has 30 days because that's how we prorate at this level anyway. And that leaves 4 left over, and then you add back that 1 for the 26th. And so that's how you know it's 5 days and not 4, because you count that 1 day. Guys, this is the only time you change your number count, and it's only on the buyer's interim interest. So on the seller's side, you don't take away a day or anything like that. This is the only time you add an extra day. And it's really not an extra day, but it looks like it is on the board. It looks like they're paying an extra day, but they get the money on the 26th. Does it make sense that they would owe that 26th? So 5 days of interest. And we pay on what we borrow. So 105 times, what was it, 7 3/4? 7 3/4 is a yearly rate, so you're going to calculate yearly interest. Did you get 8137.50? 8137.50. And then we divide that by 360 because we want a per day rate. Remember, 360 days a year, 30 days a month, and I've got 22.604. In your prorating arithmetic guidelines, it says to leave your numbers at least 3 to the right of the decimal until you're finished. And so times 5 days will be the entry for interim interest. So I have 113.02. Everybody good on that? If you took your numbers out of the calculator, let me put this here for a minute. Let's go back to and start putting it in again. 105.7, 105. So that's 8137.50 divided by 360. How many of you are okay leaving your numbers in the calculator until you're through? Or how many of you like to stop and clear each step?
I cleared.
You like, okay, so if you clear each step, you would have taken out and said that literally like that, 22.604. I leave my numbers in because I think it's time saving. So I've got the whole long number, and if I multiply times 5, I get 11302, literally. Let's see what that is. 22,604 times 5. It's the same thing, 11302. But my point is, if you leave your numbers in, your pennies may be a little bit different than if you took it out and put that number. If your pennies are off a little bit, they weren't on this one, but if they are, don't worry about that, because your answer choices are not going to be off by pennies. So I personally like to leave my numbers in the calculator, because all I'm seeing is it's time consuming to write it down, clear the calculator, put it back in. And I also see there's a possibility of making an error doing that too. But if you're used to taking your numbers out and writing down each number, don't change the way you do it. But just make sure you're consistent and leave your numbers at least 3 to the right of the decimal. Alrighty, so the answer was debit buyer, and it would be, 6 would be A. So Kim, you asked about that. Are you good on that now? Interim interest is one of those that, that does stump students, because catching that one day can really throw you off. Well, what about the seller's interest? Look at number 7. If the seller has a loan, it does have to be paid off at closing unless the new buyer is assuming the loan. And didn't we say most loans are not assumable anyhow unless the buyer can fully qualify? So number 7 is what we call accrued interest. Did anybody have any trouble with that? Let's look at it. The payoff when the seller made their loan payment May 1, the balance was $37,779. Interest rate 7%. Well, they're closing on May 18th. So May 1, made a payment, and the balance became $37,779. May 1 payment covered April's interest. It's called interest in arrears, and what was left over brought the balance to $37,779. They are not going to be there to make June 1 payment, are they? So they're not going to make June 1 payment, and we're closing May 18th. So the lender says, hey, you're going to owe 18 days of interest. Tell me if that makes sense. You made a payment May 1, but it covered last month's interest. You're going to use our money for 18 more days, and you're not going to make another payment, so we need 18 days of interest. It's called accrued interest. Go ahead and calculate that. 37,779. So I got 7.3459. So if you want to take it out, you could have either said 7.345 or you could have said 7.346, you know, however you wanted to do it. And so how many days do they owe? 18 exactly. Guys, there's no fiddling around with the numbers. They're keeping it 18 days. So multiply that times 18, and that gives you 132.226 or 132.23. And in your answers, they just went ahead and rounded, they just left it at whole dollars. So is everybody good? So that's the difference in accrued and interim. Accrued is the first of the month through closing, and interim is the closing day through the end of the month. So if the buyer was buying this property on the 18th and they got a loan, they would pick that day up and go to the 30th. So you're looking at it and it looks like both people are paying on the 18th. They would, because it's two different loans. Two different loans with two different interest rates maybe, two different loan balances. So if you were also figuring out the buyer's interest in this same problem, you would start with the 18th and go to the end of the month. So it'd be 13 days for the buyer, if that were the case. Does that make sense? It's not, the bank's not double dipping, it's two different loans, two different transactions.
So was it a credit to the seller?
No, debit seller. On number 7, it'd be B-Boy, debit seller 132, because they owe it. Well, let's look at number 8, everybody, because on your solutions, I did make a careless error. I figured the interest on the sales price instead of on the loan amount, and hopefully you caught that, but let's put it on the board. I don't know how Chris showed you, but this is the way I would do my, how much does a buyer bring to closing, or how much does the seller owe at closing? So question number 8, the question is, how much does the buyer bring to closing? And you do have one of these on your final, and it is a little bit wordy, kind of like the one in your textbook. It's going to be a lot of entries in there. So let's just start. My advice to you would be read one line at a time and make your entry. I would not skip around because you might forget something. So the Joneses bought a house for $90,000. If it's the buyer and they're buying this house for $90,000, is that a debit to the buyer or a credit to the buyer? Debit to the buyer. Because debit means they owe it. They owe $90,000 right now. They've got a loan at 8% with 10% down. We're not going to figure out the 10% to make an entry, but we do need to figure out the loan amount. So if they're putting down 10%, then they're getting a 90% LTV, right? 90% loan to value. So 90% times 90 is $81,000. The loan to the buyer, do they owe the loan on the day of closing, or do they get the money on the day of closing? They get it. So the bank's bringing $81,000 on the day of closing to help the buyer buy this $90,000 home. So if you look at it right now, this is the goal, everybody. How much does the buyer owe? Right now they owe $9,000, but we're not finished. Okay, next is they got to pay 1 point origination fee and 2 discount points. 1 point origination is 1%. 2 discount points are 2%. So we could just go ahead and say 3% if you want to. Do y'all want to do it that way? So 3% times the loan amount is how much they owe in discount points and loan origination. Did you get 2430? Now you could have done it separately. That would be okay. And it would be shown separately on a closing form, but 3% of the loan amount is $24.30. Next entry, their first payment will be August 1. So that tells me, and since I saw the 8% interest rate, it tells me I need to figure interim interest. So if you haven't done that yet, let's figure the interim interest on this loan. The closing is June 10th. So we're figuring interim interest right now. How many days? 21. So did you get 6480 divided by 360? $18 a day. $81 times 8%. $64.80. So that's $18 a day. And Kim said, if we're closing on June 10th, that means the buyer owes through the rest of the month. And so, looks like 20 days, but we gotta grab the day of closing, so it's 21 days. Times $18 a day. How many?
378.
Good. So is it a debit or a credit today? Debit. Alrighty. Next, the attorney fee is $300, title insurance is $125, and the recording for the deed are $37. Are those buyer fees?
Yeah.
Yes. So let's put down what is it, 300? So all those are charges to the buyer. They made a $2,500 earnest money deposit. I saw a quiz question that may have come up on one of your tests. Earnest money deposit could be called a binder too. So if you see the word binder, they're talking about earnest money deposit. So what do we do with the $2,500? Credit. Guys, the sales contract tells you a lot of this, doesn't it? It says they'll get it back at closing. And then real property taxes for the year are $1,200 and have not been paid. If the taxes for the year have not been paid, who owes taxes at closing? No, not both. Seller. Why are you guys saying both?
I thought we were supposed to debit, it depends on when they took it.
If they haven't been paid, period.
Have not been paid.
Okay, so
Guys, does the tax bill even come out in June?
No.
The taxes are not due yet. And so we're settling up between the buyer and the seller. We're not collecting it to the tax department today. Now, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about or thinking about double debit tax. So let me remind you about that a minute. Taxes can be handled one of three different ways. One way would be the seller could have gone ahead and paid the whole year, and that would be called prepaid. If the seller paid the whole year, then they need to get back part of the year they're not going to be living there. And so that would be credit seller, debit buyer. The taxes could also be unpaid, where we're not collecting them at closing, we're just settling up with the two parties. And unpaid taxes would be debit seller, credit buyer. And it would be a dollar for dollar exchange, meaning a double entry, meaning the dollar amount from one party to the other is exactly the same. So if the seller owes the buyer $200, the buyer receives $200. The numbers are exactly the same. The other way taxes could be handled, and the only time you would do this is if you're instructed to do this, and that would be called double debit. Double debit means the closing is probably so late in the year that the lender has told the attorney, collect the taxes from each party because we want to send in the tax bill today. We don't want it getting slipping up and slipping by and getting lost. So double debit would be by instruction only, and it would be taxes have not been paid, but the lender wants them collected and paid at closing. So that would only be if you're instructed to do it that way. It's rare to have it done that way. So double debit would be each party pays their share and the numbers would be different because they're two debits. On a double entry, you've got a debit and a credit, and so the numbers have to be the same. Not paid yet, the seller owes that right there. They've lived in the property January 1 through and including June 10th. So you need to figure out what those days of taxes will be. How many days will it be?
From January to June.
January 1 to June 10th. 160. 5 full months plus 10 days. 160. And the taxes were $1,200. So isn't that, is it $3 and something a day? 3.333 times 160, and you got 533.33. That's a credit to the buyer because the seller's saying, let me give you my part of the bill. Because when you get the tax bill, it's a specific lien, you'll be paying the entire bill, here's my share today. And so seller is being charged that amount and they're giving it to the buyer. So a double entry, everybody, the same dollar amount just changes hands. Any questions on that?
I have a question.
533,
So the 533.33 would be a credit as well as a debit?
a debit to the seller.
A debit to the seller.
But we're not doing the seller side, so that's why I only wrote it up there one time. We're only doing the buyer, so it's a credit to the buyer. Anybody else?
So when do we know when to do a double debit?
Yeah,
Last-
They will tell you in the problem.
because last time we were, I swear we were
I
told
thought
to
I saw-
assume, we were told to assume it was a double debit,
I thought that's all we
both
did.
sides.
No,
It's only if it specifically says that.
only if it's specifically. Chris told you to assume it was a double debit? He's gonna get a text from me.
Because I asked him specifically, I went up to the front because I wanted to understand.
He's a friend of mine. It's not double
No,
debit.
it's-
The only time it would be double debit is if they say, treat the taxes as a double debit. Or they could say, the taxes will be paid today, and that means double debit. No, the taxes, that would be unusual.
Okay.
So the taxes are either seller owes the buyer, or either the seller gets back
Some of the,
what they already paid. Double debit is unusual, but that is in your reading. Let's go find it for a minute. It's on page 608. If you want to look in your textbook, real property taxes, it's your second note at the bottom. Real property taxes might be handled as a double debit under certain circumstances. So the operative word is may be handled that way. Agreement by the buyer and the seller, they could agree to go ahead and pay that bill. But guys, the bill's not even out in June. If they sent that money to the tax department in June, the tax department won't know what to do with it. No offense, but the bill hadn't even been sent out, right? It'll mess it up. It'll be messed up. The seller has received the bill and the taxes have not been paid, or the taxes are to be paid at settlement. So we're not going to ever assume that it's double debit. If you have a math problem on this, it will tell you if that's what they want you to do. It'll say treat this as double debit, or they'll say the taxes are going to be paid at closing, which means double debit. Okay? So 3 ways to handle taxes. Either the seller paid the whole year and they get money back from the buyer, or the seller has not paid and they owe their part of the year to the buyer. So 1 or 2 ways. Everybody okay on that? All
Well,
right.
The next part of that question is what tries to throw you off and think it's double debit.
Where? Oh, about the seller paying the personal property tax?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're gonna pay the personal property tax at closing,
But
because
that's irrelevant to the buyer, right?
seller.
that's irrelevant
That's
to
what
the
I'm saying.
buyer.
That's where it says tax collector at closing, that's kind of the manipulative way to say that, or manipulative way to say that taxes at closing, giving you the idea that it could be double debit. It's just a wording trying to throw you off.
Okay.
I mean, am I the only one that thinks that?
Is that what y'all thought by saying it?
Because the double debit, I knew that it was, yeah, if it states taxes are to be closed, or are to be paid at closing.
That's right.
That being said in there, personal property taxes are irrelevant to the buyer.
Yeah, but this is information, it's got the seller information and buyer's information. And so, out of this problem, you just need to say, I don't need that information
Right, that's
because
fine,
it's the
yeah.
seller's.
It's a throw.
Yeah, but, yeah, I see what you're saying, but they're saying that just this personal property tax will be paid at closing, but I do get what you're saying, that could have been misread. I get you. All right, now we got everything in there. How much does a buyer need to close? What your goal is, add up your total debits, add up your total credits, and subtract the lower number, hopefully the lower, subtract the credit from the debits, and the buyer brings the difference. So why don't you do that, because we do have a real life problem like this. Does that make sense? 923667? That would be on the credit side, by the way. If the credit side would be monies that are coming in to help the buyer, and he would be bringing in the rest of that money to pay the debit. So in other words, these two sides equal each other. And so it's going to be a zero when it's done. In other words, the lawyer collects all the money, and then he writes all the checks that need to be written. So the money that comes to the lawyer's trust account always goes out on that transaction. They're not going to keep any money lingering in that trust account. So money in, money exactly out. That's why it zeroes out. Any other questions?
Attorney fees always the buyer unless it says otherwise.
Attorney fees would be buyer. The attorney fee that a seller would pay would be deed prep. If it says deed preparation, because the seller is responsible for having the deed there, that would be sellers. If it said attorney fee to clear a defect on the title, who do you think would pay that? Seller. But if it just says attorney fee, it would be buyer, because that's the fee to handle the closing and to do all the paperwork and the time of settling it all up. Okay, are y'all pretty good on that? So number 9 on the seller, the number 9 says how much cash will the seller get? Do y'all want to work on that a minute, or did you already? Okay, let's work on it a few minutes if you want to. Number 9, how much does the seller get? Now, personally, I would still do my debit credit column, because you're adding up what do they owe and you're adding up what do they get. Linda, I saw your face. I'm not gonna give Chris a spanking. Linda says, "Oh, don't tell him. Don't tell him." Chris is a buddy of mine. But
We can play back the video.
what?
We can play back the video.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. He's going to be here Thursday night teaching landlord-tenant property management. That's his thing. And so he's expert on that. And so you'll He's pretty energetic, isn't he? He's pretty good, he's a good instructor. Okay, so y'all working on number 9? This is a good problem, knowing who pays what. Like you were asking, Demarius, knowing whose closing costs are whose. How y'all doing on that? Take a few more minutes and then we'll go over it. ready to get this one started? Okay. Seller sold their property for $100,000 and the closing is March 15th. What do we do with the 100,000? Credit. They're getting this money today, minus a few things. They're charging, the broker is charging 6.5%. 6.5% times this.
6,500.
Debit, if it's a charge, it's over there. Alrighty, and they must pay off their $57,250 loan. Where does that go on the seller's chart? Debit. They owe it, they gotta pay it, so it goes there. Taxes have not been paid and are expected to be $990 for real and $100 for personal for personal. Well, we know that the $100 has to be paid. It's not prorated. Is everybody good on that? Personal property tax is not prorated. It's about the personal property that goes with the seller, not shared with the buyer. But the $900 is going to be prorated. So 900 divided by 360,
990.
990. I beg your pardon. And what did you get a day? 275 even, Stephen? 275. Now, they have not been paid. They didn't tell us to collect from both parties. The seller owes the buyer. And so, does it make sense that they owe the beginning of the year through and including closing? Because that's how long they're going to live there. And so, how many days? 75 times 2.75. Who couldn't count?
Oh, I can't count.
Did you get 206.25? What did you miscount?
I forgot a whole month. I did 45 minutes.
Oh, you forgot a whole month. Okay. Other closing expenses, now we're gonna look at what are the seller's expense. They don't pay the attorney fee, we said buyer pays that, didn't we? They do pay the deed prep. The deed has to be prepared and the seller owes it. And then recording fees on the new loan, is that a buyer or seller? Buyer. Loan origination? Buyer. Revenue stamps is another word for, another term I should say, for excise tax. Who pays that? Seller. And title insurance, who pays that? Buyer. Buyer put up a $3,000 binder. Does it affect the seller?
No.
No. So we got our debits and our credit, and you add those up and get the difference. What?
Sorry, the binder.
That's earnest money.
Oh, earnest money, never mind.
Doesn't affect the seller at the closing anyway. The earnest money does affect the seller. How so?
Because it comes back to the buyer. Is it the buyer?
It's a credit to the buyer. But why does, when I say it does affect the seller but not at closing, what do I mean?
If it breaches?
If the buyer breaches, the seller is considering this earnest money, everybody, when the offer comes in. They're looking at all of the terms, and the earnest money coming in, $3,000 on a $100,000 house is pretty good earnest money. It's a pretty good binder. And so that would be the reason the seller would pay attention to it. But when you're looking at their numbers, it doesn't affect them. So what did you get on the seller's debit side? Did you get 30, did you get 64, 306, 25? And so the seller gets the difference, which is 35.
693.75.
Yeah, because that's going to zero out. Now, what the seller gets at closing is on the debit side. Why would it be on the debit side of the closing statement? The seller's check at closing is a debit to the closing. Why? Because it's going away from the closing. It's a check written at closing. Guys, if there's a check written at closing, it means it's going out. So it's going against. And so it goes against the total credits because those two columns have to equal each other. So it's a check written at closing, it's going to be a debit against the closing. It's going away from the closing. Credits come into the closing. Debits go away from the closing. That make sense? Doesn't seem like it'd be a debit, but it's not. It's a debit to the closing. When he gets the money, it's cash and credit to him then. But right now, it's a charge to the closing because it's a check written. Okay then, any other questions about this math? Let's do this just for fun. I want to show you something. If you'll go with me to your textbook, page 612. Okay, I want to talk to you about something. We're going to figure a couple of these math questions out without doing the math. If you understand the whole process of the debit credits, if you understand who gets what, who pays who, if you understand the idea of double entry, meaning the buyer's debited and the seller's credited, or the seller's debited and the buyer's credited, then if you understand all that, you don't have to use your calculator. So I would like for you to look at number 19, and I want you just to read it and not do the math. I want you to read it and just figure it out logically what the answer would be. Number 19.
It's fire department.
Yeah, fire department. Alrighty, so let's kind of reason through it. If the taxes have been paid in advance, who paid the whole year of taxes? Seller. Now, if you're closing on September 15th, they're not using the whole year, are they? So does it make sense to you they will be getting a credit? And does it make sense to you it'll be coming from the buyer, so it'll be a buyer debit? And if they're exchanging money, it's got to be the same amount of money passing hands. So what's the answer? D. And you didn't even have to do the math. You just had to look at it and understand. Now, it wouldn't have been it wouldn't be A or B because the numbers are different. The number from the buyer and the seller are different amounts, so you can eliminate those. And letter C, it's the numbers are the same, but the entry credit buyer, debit seller is off. Alrighty, look with me then at number 24. Do the same thing. Don't use the calculator, just reason through it. Is it making sense? What would be the answer? B-boy. Everybody good on B-boy? The seller paid the whole year, and they're only gonna get back half of November and December. So wouldn't it be a smaller amount than that $1,100? So, credit seller, debit buyer. Let's do one a little bit more challenging, not that difficult, but I want you to think and not do the math. Go to page 780. And I'd like you to look at 102. Now, they didn't give you the math, but they gave you the tax rate and they give you the tax value. So you should be able to look at those numbers and figure out, are the taxes a whole bunch or are the taxes just a little bit? And figure out what to do there without doing the calculator. See if you can do it. Okay, so how you doing on that one? A. Taxes. Were the taxes, which of the following is, what's the question? Which of the following is correct? Now, it didn't tell you whether the taxes have been paid or not. If they don't tell you, well, then they haven't been paid. And even looking at the date, the time of the year, are taxes paid in April? No, they're not. So these are unpaid taxes, so you can take from that, we know we're gonna debit the seller. So if you're looking at your answer choices, it will, well, you can eliminate B-boy, can't you? Because the seller's not gonna be credited, they're gonna be charged. And are they gonna be charged the most of the year or a little bit of the year? A little bit of the year. And so it would be, if I were guessing, I would pick the littler number, wouldn't you? I would pick 151. Can't be B, we said. Can't be C because the numbers are different. But if you look down at D, guys, if the tax assessed value is $64,000 and just looking at 72%, 72 cents on a dollar or 72 cents for every dollar, that's not going to be a big tax bill. And so I would feel comfortable choosing a smaller number, would you? My whole point to you is, if you understand this, you can read it and work through it and move on, is my point to you. Now, if the numbers are close and they're big numbers and you got to figure it out, I'm going to say figure it out. But I think that one's pretty easy to look at. Do y'all? Was it pretty easy? Okay, then. Let's do this. We're going to take a break, but what we're going to do next is go over the closing quiz. just so that we review the closing, and then we're gonna get into our appraising lecture. Okay, take your 10 minutes.